The church in Lubbock, Texas smelled of lilies and old hymnals the day we buried my brother. Pews packed tight, black coats, sunburnt faces. I stood in the aisle with a hand on the pew, steadying my breath. The clerk cleared his throat. Paper crackled. The doors groaned. Shoes clicked, slow and deliberate. Ethan, my son in a press suit that fit like a loan. He didn't glance at the casket. He fixed on me. You don't deserve a single acre of that, old man. Heads turned. Unprotected, I said even. This is a funeral. Said, my uncle was manipulated. You never earned that land or those 900 head or that truck. The pastor lifted a hand. Please. Ethan raised his voice. He's a parasite. The word hung, bright and ugly. My jaw wanted to answer. I kept it closed. Sometimes silence works harder than words. Across the aisle, two women breathed into each other's hair. Taya always thought Frank was sliding. Pension checks in pity. They weren't whispering for privacy. They were whispering to be heard. Those little cuts landed truer than the shout. Samuel stood beside me, a fence post in wind. He didn't squeeze my arm. He didn't need to. Let him burn out his poison, he said low. The pastor tried for a prayer. The words skittered. Ethan held the aisle like a roadblock, daring me to climb over him. I looked at my brother's name on the program. I set my palm flat on the pew until the tremor settled. Shame scraped my throat, resolve set like iron. Amen. People hesitated, then poured toward the doors. I waited until the row emptied. Ethan drifted closer. You can hand it back now, he said. Make this easy. The Beck. The only easy thing today, I said, is walking out without another show. That a no? Eat again. He stepped aside just enough to force me to brush past. I didn't give him the shoulder he wanted. I gave him my silence. Outside, the light felt too clean for the words we'd thrown around. Heat carried cut grass and motor oil. I crossed the gravel to the old F-150, dust filmed, paint dulled to storm cloud. My brother kept it running on baling wire and prayer. It wasn't pretty, but it always started. My's relic, one of the whispering women said, eyes sliding off mine. Shame it's wasted. I opened the door, the hinge groaned. The bench seat gave the way only old foam does, tired but loyal. I set both hands on the wheel until the pulse in my wrists stopped punching. The church doors thudded as people spilled out, noise like birds flushed from brush. Samuel came to the window. He looked at me, then back at the steps where Ethan stood, with a knot of men who liked to fight they didn't have to pay for. You don't owe him a scene, Samuel said. I won't give him one. Then let's go. Plenty to do that isn't bleeding for strangers. I turned the key. The engine coughed, caught, settled into a rough, even idle. I eased us into the slow river of cars. In the mirror, Ethan watched, jaw tight, phone already in his hand. He was planning the next moment. That was fine. So was I. Queens left the east side of the church. The lilies perfumed the heat. The word he'd thrown kept bouncing in my head like a trapped bird. Parasite. I let it fly out the open window and into the Texas air where it could die in the sun. At the exit, I paused for a line of cars. People looked into my cab and then away. A few lifted their chins, half guilty, half hungry. My hand stayed on the wheel, steady. Minimized, Samuel asked. Home. We turned onto the road, the tires hummed, the church dropped in the mirror. Ethan stayed on the steps, talking too loud and mistaking noise for power. I didn't look back again. I didn't have to. His hostility rode with us without a seatbelt, daring me to hit the brakes. I didn't. I drove, and I let the silence work. The house was too quiet after the funeral. I sat at the kitchen table with Lydia's will folder spread out, like it wanted to remind me of everything I hadn't asked for, but now had to defend. Paper crackled when I moved it, but it didn't sound like victory. It sounded like work. My brother's land, 900 cattle, and that damned F-150 parked outside, a silent witness to how fast Ethan had stripped the air out of me in front of half the county. Suppressed at the screen door made me look up. Samuel Ortiz stepped in, steady as always, holding a thermos and 2 chipped mugs. Figured you hadn't eaten, he said. I managed a thin smile. You figured right. the bitter smell of coffee filling the room. We didn't talk at first, we just sat, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Two men who'd buried too many people and carried too many secrets. Finally, he leaned forward. Crowned. She meant it, Frank. Every line in that will. Underestimated it once. Doesn't stop him. No, he said. It doesn't. Expect trouble. I let the words settle. They weren't a warning. They were a promise of what Ethan was already planning. My son didn't believe in second chances. He believed in taking what he thought he was owed. I stood and went to the window. The F-150 was parked under the oak tree. For years, it was just a work truck. Tonight, it looked heavier, as if it knew it was about to be dragged into a war neither of us wanted. Confiscated thing, I said, voice low. When I was still in uniform, I thought the fight stopped when the paperwork was signed. Now I see the paperwork as just the opening bell. I've me a look that mixed sympathy with steel. You've still got allies. Don't forget that. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't shame. It was resolve settling into bone. Ethan had called me a parasite. Let him. He could scream it on the courthouse steps if he wanted. I wasn't moving. I closed the folder, slid it back into its sleeve, and shut the drawer with a hard click. Whatever storm Ethan brought next, I'd be ready. When Samuel left, I lingered at the doorway, watching the taillights fade into the night. The silence that returned wasn't peaceful, it was loaded, waiting. Out in the yard, the F-150 glinted under the porch light. A symbol, a burden, and for now, a promise. The smell of bacon and coffee filled the little cafe off Main Street, the kind of place where every face knows your history. I had barely unfolded my napkin when the air shifted. Ethan walked in, phone raised, a smirk on his face like he was about to win a game no one else knew was being played. "Morning, folks," he said loud enough to cut through the chatter. He tapped his screen and suddenly the video played. Me at last year's retirees' banquet, fumbling with note cards, coughing, searching for words. Cut to black, then again. The room hushed, then laughter broke like glass. "Would you trust this man with 300 acres?" The caption read in bold red across the screen. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. A flush crawled up my neck, not from shame, but from the weight of every eye now cutting into me. Samuel shifted beside me. "Let him run it out," he whispered. His jaw was tight. Ethan walked right to my table, turned the screen so the nearest neighbors could see. "Can't finish a sentence, Dad. How are you supposed to manage 900 head of cattle?" I swallowed hard, kept my voice low. "You're still the boy who mistakes cruelty for proof." His smirk faltered just long enough for me to see the crack. Then he bowed like he was on a stage. The crowd laughed again, nervous and eager to avoid choosing sides. Inside, my chest ached like I'd taken a body blow. Heart pulse. My dignity wasn't slipping. It was being auctioned off, one laugh at a time. "Enough," I said, voice flat. "You've made your point." Our eyes locked, father and son. Blood and betrayal. Ethan leaned in close. Points just the start. He left the cafe in silence, but the whispers stayed behind. I stood, paid my bill, and walked out past the flyer pinned by the door. Friday breakfast, 7 a.m. Its date stamped in fresh ink, proof that time was moving forward whether I was ready or not. Outside, the F-150 gleamed in the sun, but even it seemed diminished under the weight of ridicule. Prominently, Hook, a neighbor, met my eye at the door, started to speak, then turned away. That silence said more than words could. Position came just as the sun dipped below the far ridge. I opened the door to find a courier in a brown jacket. No words, just a clipboard and an envelope. He slid it across the hood of the F-150, slapped his palm once on the metal, and left without waiting for a thank you. The truck gleamed, but tonight it felt less like an heirloom and more like a target. Ride the packet into the kitchen. Samuel was already there, leaning against the counter with 2 mugs of coffee. I tore the seal and spread the papers across the table. The top sheet screamed in black type, "Petition to freeze estate distribution pending challenge." "Legal?" Samuel asked, voice steady but tight. "Lucas legal," I muttered. The stamp at the bottom glared up at me. Response due in 10 days. For a long moment I just stared. Heart pulse, not victory, not yet. Just the shaking stopped. Maxwell's voice cut through, cool as ever. Frank, I've seen it. Ethan's lawyer filed at 4 p.m. Sharp timing, hoping to scare you into a mistake. I pressed the receiver harder to my ear. And? Unleashed. And he has no standing, Maxwell said. He wasn't named. No contributions, no history of support. I'll draft the response tonight. Nothing will move until the hearing, but you should know. They'll try to drag you through every channel possible. Samuel set a mug in front of me. His eyes carried the words he didn't say, this is just the beginning. I thumbed the edge of the document. She thinks papers can bury me, I said flatly. She doesn't know the land keeps receipts. Maxwell chuckled once, the kind of laugh without humor. Exactly. Keep the paperwork safe. I'll call when the filing's ready. When the line went dead, the kitchen stayed heavy with silence. Samuel tapped the clock above the stove. 10 days, he said quietly. I folded the papers back into the envelope, slid it to the center of the table, and pressed my palm over it. My hand trembled once, then stilled. Outside, the F-150 caught the last light, stubborn and unshaken. Retention hook. I left the packet on the table, the deadline stamped in bold still visible, like a silent clock counting down over my shoulder. The barn smelled of hay and oil, a place I'd always trusted. But tonight the air felt charged. I heard Ethan's voice before I saw him. Tack, you think he'll keep you employed? My father's lining up a sale, paperwork's already drafted. Ranch hands shifted on their boots, uneasy. Samuel caught my eye as I stepped inside. He gave a slight shake of his head, warning me to tread careful. Evening, gentlemen, I said, my voice carried low and steady. What's being passed around? Ethan turned, smirk sharp as a spur. He held up a folded sheet. This, a memo with your name on it, developers lined up, you'll all be gone by winter. Murmurs rose. One of the younger hands, Miguel, handed me the page. My name scrawled in a forged header, dates, false signatures, heart pulse. Seeing my men doubt me stung deeper than any courtroom threat. I lifted the page to the light. A fake, you know it, Ethan, and so do I. He grinned wider. They don't, that's all that matters. Samuel stepped forward. He's never lied to you in 30 years, he said to the men. Ask yourselves, who's earned your trust? Between us, a silence stretched long enough to scrape family tension exchange. Our words struck like fists. Ethan, you're not fit to run this place. Me, you forged paper, Ethan. I live proof. Ethan, you are not fit to run. Not by you. I cutting a ran shadows things against the wall. In the higher ban shadows comes two forchazos of the clasto. In that split my ban shadow. And then dar marks ticks. Johnson. I have not incredible. My damn on fight document live to magics. Why well to nigh in many offers on. 8R Johnson. I turn to Madge my soul's 8 my now. Why in an ever. Johnson comps Lee. Tem contain real being life's down my mill. In one of the darm that align you, power by new potential testimony setted, and how we nighed that performs consumance. And down press to document friends after they wom, and will back to the offers on in secret more life. My national offers on Dodges blog Massachusetts that identified find the summer that document shares. Allowing that sitting in Wencestilgus to quiet for possible portion, o Massachusetts for cars. From otherworld, eight old, a fear, DBA on the 4. In him the barding. Behind him walked a man in a gray suit, briefcase in hand. Dad, Ethan said, voice smooth, rehearsed. We're here to resolve this before things get messy. He laid a folder on my kitchen table, pushing aside my coffee. The lawyer flipped it open, tapping a page with a manicured finger. Settlement agreement, the man said. Half the land, half the herd. If you sign, you avoid embarrassment. At your age, the court could appoint a trustee regardless. This way, you save face. The words hit like a shove. Heart pulse, the papers shook under my hand, but not my will. I looked at Ethan. You brought a hired voice to speak for you? Strengthening. I brought someone who understands the law, do you? Squeeze in the doorway, boots dusty from the pens. He didn't speak, just leaned against the frame, steady as bedrock. Family tension exchange flared across the table. Ethan, you'll lose everything if this goes to court. Like me. You walked away 10 years ago, and you're back for a payday. I'm back because you can't manage it. You can hire suits, Ethan. I'll bring truth. Lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Doyle, the courts don't take kindly to stubbornness. Sign and this matter ends here. I reached for the settlement papers, felt the weight of their false promise. Then I set them back down, without a mark. Here's my answer, I said. Captain Mitchell, retired, sworn 30 years on the force with me. By tomorrow, you'll have affidavits of my competence stacked higher than this pile. The lawyer's eyes flickered, Ethan's jaw locked. On the counter, the F-150 keys lay beside the folder, catching a bar of sunlight. I didn't touch them. The truck would wait, but so would I. I stood. Meeting's over, you can find the door yourselves. They hesitated, then gathered their papers. As the screen door slammed behind them, my eyes shifted to the wall calendar. The dates circled in red glared back. Hearing in 6 days. Retention hook. I left the page open on the table, unsigned, a silent marker of a battle not finished. Foreign was full, men leaning on pitchforks, hats pushed back. The dust lit up like snow in the last light. I could feel the mood before I heard the words. Ethan had chosen the barn on purpose. It wasn't just where we worked. It was where we believed. Conserved stood on a hay bale like a foreman and not a son. You all deserve the truth, he said, voice smooth as a salesman's. Frank can't carry this place. He's going to sell and you'll be left holding air. Stabbing murmurs, the kind that travel faster than facts. I stepped inside with Samuel a half step behind me. Outside, the F-150 sat nose out in the lot, dust filmed on the hood. A couple hands looked past me to the truck and then back at Ethan, as if the metal could answer for me. Battlefield, I said, no smile. If you're going to talk about my ranch, use my name. If he didn't, tell their entire murse of health. A few men straightened. Ethan didn't. He spread his arms like a preacher. Fine. Frank, tell them you're not courting developers. Tell them their jobs aren't a bargaining chip. It's easy to shout fire when you brought the matches, I said. He smirked, eyes bright with the high of a crowd. You think bluster will fix your age? Firefight tension flashed hot under the rafters. Ethan, you won't last the season. You've never lasted a season up close. They deserve certainty. Me, they deserve truth. I lifted a leather binder from under my arm and passed it to Samuel, who carried it to the first row of men. Ledger entries for the last 4 quarters. Feed contracts paid. Notes on conservation payments locked for 3 years. Payroll forecast through winter. I kept the cadence flat. Read the numbers, no one's losing work. Hands flipped pages, boots scuffed. Ethan's jaw worked, then relaxed into that same stage smile. Dressed up, he said. Everyone knows that. That's why I didn't come alone, I said. A figure cleared the doorway, Captain Mitchell, thicker through the shoulders now, white at the temples. Eyes the same steel I knew from 100 midnight calls. He carried a slim folder, not fat enough to scare, just heavy enough to matter. Evening, he said, giving the crew a nod, then me. Name's Mitchell. 30 years in uniform with Frank. I've signed a sworn statement on his competence. So have 3 other officers and the department physician. We're not here to sell anyone anything. We're here to tell the truth. I didn't reach for the folder. I didn't wave it like a flag. I let the presence do the work. Heart pulse. It wasn't the lie that stung. It was the flicker of doubt in their eyes. Ethan's laugh was quick and wrong. Old friends patting each other on the back? That's your proof? Profitability, I said, is a thing that survives being checked. Mitchell met Ethan's look without blinking. Sworn statements are checkable. Across the barn, a sheet of paper tacked to a post fluttered in the draft. Black letters, county seal. Council hearing, 5 days. The timer didn't need a clock to scream. 5 days, Samuel said. Not to me, but to the room. You'll get to watch it play out in the open. Position spread his hands again. In 5 days, he'll be shown unfit. He worked the crowd with his eyes. He can throw ledgers and nostalgia at you. What he can't do is hold this place together. Tightened, I said, coming from a man who only shows up to swing an axe. I let the line land. You're the one swinging axes, Ethan. I'm the one mending fences. A couple of the older hands snorted, not quite laughter, not quite loyalty. I caught Miguel looking down, then back up at me with a question that was also a plea. Men with mortgages and kids don't bet on speeches. It's short. You've got my word. You'll have my numbers if you want them. And in 5 days, you'll have the hearing. I won't sell what my brother built. Not to a developer, not to anyone. Ethan stepped off the hay bale, closing the distance until I could see the shaving nick on his jaw. They don't believe you, he said softly, for me alone. They don't believe you either, I said, just as soft. That's why you brought a crowd. Conserve broke apart in 2s and 3s, voices low, eyes undecided. Some shook Samuel's hand. One slapped Mitchell on the shoulder and said he remembered the captain walking him to his truck the night his wife went into labor. Others drifted toward Ethan, who said nothing now, just let them come. Outside, the wind picked up and the barn doors creaked on their hinges. The F-150 caught a line of failing light and sent it across the dirt like a slow knife. I didn't wave the affidavits. I didn't toss the ledger at their boots. I simply put a hand on the nearest post under the sign that read, Council hearing 5 days, and held my ground. When it was just the 4 of us left, me, Samuel, Mitchell, and Ethan at the threshold, like a storm that hadn't decided whether to break, I said, You've made your case. I've made mine. Let the county decide. Ethan's smile went small and mean. They'll decide. I watched him go, boots grinding gravel, back straight, shoulders up like a man who'd convinced himself noise was power. The men would talk tonight, kitchens and tailgates and porches. Doubt would walk with them. Retention hook. I reached up and pressed the corner of the hearing notice flat against the post. It curled back the second I let go. The next morning, I eased the old F-150 down the gravel drive, dust trailing behind me like a flag I didn't ask to carry. Folks in town had already heard what happened in the barn. Some tipped their hats as I passed, others turned their faces away. A man can feel the split in a community without a single word spoken. I parked outside the county council office, the truck's hood catching the sun. That old engine ticked, as if it too knew we were walking into another test. Inside, the air smelled of paper and floor wax. A young clerk sat behind the counter, straight-backed, efficient. Frank Doyle, I said, here to check the docket? She nodded, pulled a file, and slid a single page across. The top carried a red stamp. Hearing D-3, 3 days. My eyes stayed on those numbers longer than I'd admit. For Friday evening, she said. I folded the page slow, slipped it into my pocket, one more stone in the rucksack Ethan had been filling for me. In the hallway, voices rose. Ethan leaned against the wall like he owned the place, a grin cutting wide. He'd been waiting. Well, he said loud enough for the clerk to hear. Old man's got a date, 3 days to prove he's not losing his marbles. I kept my voice level. You file what you want. Truth doesn't scare me. He stepped closer, cologne sharp, words sharper. Truth doesn't matter, paperwork does. Judges, counsel, people read black ink, not stories about brotherly love. Samuel shifted beside me, hands tucked behind his back, steady as ever. Paperwork only scares men who can't stand in the open, I said. For the first time, Ethan's smile faltered. Just a flicker, then he recovered, turned to the clerk with a mock bow. See you Friday, he tossed over his shoulder as he strode out. The silence he left behind was heavier than the words. I pressed the folded docket against my palm like it might burn through. Walking back into the town square, I caught sight of the F-150. 2 men near the diner watched it, then watched me. One nodded, the other shook his head. That truck had become more than steel. It was a vote, a line in the sand. I drove home slow. Samuel didn't fill the cab with talk. He never did. Just the hum of tires and the tick of the cooling engine. Back at the ranch, Mitchell's voice greeted me from the answering machine. Frank, it's Mitchell. You need to see this file tomorrow, first thing. No explanation, just that steady rasp that had hauled me through darker days on the force. I stared at the blinking light. 1 file, 3 days, and a son who knew how to twist paperwork into shackles. Heart pulse. I felt the ground shift under me, quieter than a quake, but just as dangerous. Position at Lydia's old desk, docket spread in front of me. My hand traced the red stamp again, steady now. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight, loud in the quiet house. Didn't call Mitchell back. Not yet. The machine blinked one unheard message, daring me to press play again. Mitchell smelled faintly of old tobacco and lemon oil. The curtains were half drawn, leaving a shaft of sunlight to fall across a desk stacked with folders. He waved me in with a grin that hadn't softened much in 30 years. "Sit, Frank. I've been waiting for you." I sat across from him, my hands steady on the chair arms. He opened a thick brown folder, each page clipped tight. "Here," he said, sliding it toward me. "Your name cleared. Sworn and sealed. Affidavits from 3 former captains, 2 sergeants, and the pension board. Every accusation Ethan's slinging, dead on arrival." I touched the paper, felt its weight. Heart pulse. For the first time in weeks, I held paper that defended me instead of condemning me. "Mitchell," I said, voice low, "I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd fight anyway, but this will keep you from bleeding out in court." Squeezed Bain back, eyes gleaming. "That boy of yours thinks he can bury you under rumor. Rumor doesn't stand against record." I thumbed through the signatures, ink strokes from men I bled beside, worked alongside. Some were long retired, some barely hanging on to life, but they still signed for me. "Chain of custody?" I asked. "Old instincts never die. Stamped, notarized, all by the book. If they try to twist it, I'll stand in front of the board myself." I nodded. My gaze drifted to the wall calendar. Big black X's crossed the past days. A red circle glared at me. Friday, 7 p.m., council hearing. The countdown was alive, shouting from the wall. 3 days. Mitchell rose and walked me out to the porch. The Texas sun hit us hard. My brother's old F-150 was parked by the curb. Mitchell slapped the hood. "Still runs straighter than half this county," he said. I chuckled, but the weight never left my chest. That truck had carried hay, cattle feed, and now it carried me through a storm. By dusk, I was back in town, the folder locked tight in my briefcase. I crossed the square toward the cafe. Laughter spilled from tables outside. And there he was, Ethan, my son, suit coat off, tie loose, leaning too close to 2 council members. I slowed my step, listening. His voice was honeyed, smooth. "Trust me, gentlemen, the ranch needs fresh hands. My father's not the man he once was." One of them nodded, sipping coffee. The other laughed. Narrowing, he shook their hands, loud enough for me to hear, "We'll talk more tomorrow." Then he turned, smirk painted across his face. I stopped at the edge of the sidewalk. "Funny," I muttered, just loud enough, "how a man needs shadows when truth would do." Flooring, closer, voice low. "Won't save you, Dad. I've got people, real people." I met his gaze. "I've got proof. Proof doesn't shake hands in alleys." Homeless cracked for a second, then he masked it, turning back toward his new friends. I walked home under a bruised sky. Samuel caught up to me near the square. "You heard?" he asked. "Enough," I said. "What's he playing?" "He's buying whispers. I've got ink." Samuel nodded once. "Then it'll be his whispers against the law." Didn't answer. My hand brushed the folder in my briefcase. Proof against whispers. The balance was fragile, and Ethan knew it. At home, I set the folder on the table untouched. The calendar's red circle burned in my head. 3 days. I didn't answer. The machine clicked. Mitchell's voice filled the kitchen. "Frank, keep that folder close. Don't let it out of sight." Quiet, staring at the folder. Outside, the cattle shifted in the dark. Inside, my son's smirk lingered. Retention device. I couldn't shake the image of Ethan shaking hands in the shadows, words I couldn't fully hear. Tomorrow, I would. The barn smelled of hay and sweat, familiar but suddenly uneasy. I walked in just as the workers' chatter cut short. Every eye followed me. They weren't hostile, but they weren't steady either. Too many whispers had been planted. Samuel stood near the wall, arms folded, a quiet anchor. Ethan leaned against a beam like he owned the place. A folder sat on the hay bale beside him. He waited until I stopped in the middle of the floor. Then he straightened, smooth voice carrying. "Folks, you deserve honesty. My father isn't giving you the whole story." Murmurs rose. He picked up the folder and pulled a single sheet free, holding it high. "This is a developer's memo, proof he's already preparing to sell half the acres. Once that happens, what happens to your jobs?" Forestry shifted uneasily. Jordan, the youngest, glanced at Samuel, then back to me. I stepped forward slowly. "Show them the signature." Ethan smirked, letting the paper dangle. "Why don't you? Your name's right here." I caught a flash of my own signature, crooked but too perfect. A photocopy paste. Lush ranch hand muttered, "Looks real enough." Samuel stepped forward. "Frank's been running this place longer than any of us. If he says it's false, I believe him." But the doubt clung. Ethan spread his arms. "You hear that?" he says, "but the paper proves it. Are you willing to gamble your paychecks on a man's word over written evidence?" The room quieted. I felt the air grow heavy, pressing on my chest heavier than any courtroom ever had. I steadied my voice. "You forged my silence on that paper, Ethan, but you can't forge the years I worked this land. You all know me. Ask yourselves if a piece of paper, handed out by someone who vanished for a decade, means more than the sweat we've shared." Silence stretched. For a moment, I thought it might hold. Then Ethan turned the knife. He had the bulletin board in the barn wall, a notice flapped there. "Council hearing, 3 days left." The red letters screamed finality. Ethan tapped it. "3 days," he said, "before the county decides if he's fit to keep control. That's all the time you've got to decide if you'll still have jobs. Trust him if you want, but you've seen the memo." The murmurs rose again, louder, messier. Some voices supported me, others whispered uncertainty. I tried to meet their eyes one by one, but too many turned away. Ethan knew he had seeded enough poison for tonight. He slid the memo back into the folder and walked out with a grin sharp enough to cut wire. The barn doors groaned shut behind him, leaving the workers shifting uncomfortably. Samuel put a hand on my shoulder, firm. "We'll ride this, Frank. Don't let tonight bury you." But I felt the weight. The affidavits from Mitchell were strong, but here in the barn, among the men who worked the land, a forged sheet had carved a wound. I walked outside past the F-150 parked under the floodlight. Its hood caught the glow, steady and unbent. I touched the metal, grounding myself. Take. The hearing notice still burned in my head. 3 days left. The county clerk's office smelled of toner and stale air. The fluorescent lights hummed, and the line behind me muttered about permits and taxes. I held the affidavits in my left hand, the F-150's keys in my right. They jingled once when I shifted my weight, a sound steadier than my pulse. I stepped to the counter. The clerk, a young man with square glasses and a tie too tight for his neck, reached for the papers. His voice was dry. "Purpose of filing?" "Defense of estate standing," I said. "Affidavits confirming capacity." He stamped the top page. "Filed D2. The sound cracked like a gavel. Ethan's voice sliced across the lobby. "You think a stamp makes you fit, old man?" He was leaning against the far wall in a gray suit, sleeves pushed up like he'd come to work, not to bury his father's name. He crossed the floor fast, papers already in hand. "On," he announced, sliding them toward the clerk. "Request for competency review. Emergency hearing." Unmatched, the clerk froze, caught between us. I leaned an elbow on the counter, my voice steady. "You always did love theater, Ethan, but paperwork isn't theater. It leaves a trail." He snapped. "Courts are slow. Time is my ally." Sir, I let the keys in my pocket jingle once more, then said low, "You can stall the clock, but time's never been on your side." The ranch hands waiting on permits turned their heads. His jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. The clerk cleared his throat. "Both filings received, motions logged." He pushed a receipt toward me, another toward Ethan. I slid mine into the folder. Ethan stuffed his in his jacket like a trophy. "Legacy isn't written by clerks," he said. "It's written by who shows up." Unleashed to him. You showed up after your uncle's funeral with nothing but a suit and a sneer. That's not legacy. That's scavenging. His eyes flashed. You think these affidavits prove anything? Old cops scratching each other's backs? Judges won't buy it. They will, I said, because every line is sworn under oath, and because they know me. They don't know you. For a second, silence settled, heavy as the stamped page between us. Outside, the sun hit me square. The courthouse steps stretched longer than they should have. I paused, folder tight under my arm, breath dragging. Heart pulse. The county stamp felt heavy, pressing against my chest. My phone buzzed. Captain Mitchell's name lit the screen. I answered on the second ring. Supervised. You file it? Constrained. Yes, stamped. Killing. The affidavits are solid, you'll need them. Before I could answer, the call crackled, then cut. Dead air. I tried again, straight to voicemail. I slipped the phone back in my pocket, staring out over the square. Ethan was across the street, talking fast to a man in a dark coat. He caught my eye, smirked, and turned his back. The weight of the filed affidavits steadied me, but his counter motion gnawed. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. Unanswered call from Mitchell. Static on the line. Maxwell's office smelled faintly of leather and dust. The blinds were half drawn, stripes of afternoon sun crossing the stacks of folders that seemed to multiply every time I visited. He motioned me into the chair across from his desk without a word, then slid a folder forward. Frank, this is the certified ranch ledger, he said. Every head of cattle accounted for, every conservation contract logged. It proved solvency, it proved stewardship. Uffling, I lifted the folder, its weight heavier than the paper inside. The ranch wasn't just land. It was proof of a life built piece by piece. Maxwell's eyes sharpened. We'll use this as our anchor. But Ethan, he's filed another motion. Tenton. What now? Hayes didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the door. As if on cue, the clerk stepped in, her heels sharp against the tile. She placed a single envelope on the desk, the kind that already hums with bad news before you touch it. I reached for it, but Maxwell caught my hand gently. Better I explain first. It's an emergency petition. He's demanding an expedited hearing on your fitness to manage the estate. Envelope anyway. A single sheet, stamped in black ink. Halted, set. Monday, 10 a.m. Might as well have struck me in the ribs. 3 days. Penguins. The stamp hit me harder than a fist. 3 days to prove my worth. I set the paper down, fumbling with the old F-150 keys in my pocket. They jingled against each other, small steel reminders of what was mine to keep, what I refused to surrender. Maxwell leaned forward. He's trying to corner you, Frank. Short notice, less prep time. He wants you rattled. If he thinks a stamp date scares me, he's forgotten who taught him to stand in a courtroom. Maxwell allowed himself the smallest smile. Then we'll fight on Monday. But tonight you start preparing. Witnesses, records, every page in that ledger, memorize it. He'll try to paint you as confused, we'll paint you as steady. I nodded, flipping the first page of the ledger. The rows of numbers blurred for a moment, then sharpened into meaning. Calves born, steers sold, pasture rotation dates. This was my language, not Ethan's. Family tension exchange, though he wasn't in the room. Ethan's voice echoed in my memory, sharp as glass. You don't deserve a single acre. And my answer, now steadier than it had ever been. I won't lose a single acre, not to you, not to anyone. The clerk slipped out, closing the door softly, leaving me and Maxwell under the weight of silence. Outside, the courthouse clock chimed 5 times, marking the end of the day. For me, it marked the beginning of the countdown. I closed the ledger, set the F-150 keys on top, and looked at Maxwell. We'll be ready. He gave a crisp nod. Monday, 10 sharp. Retention device. The paper, with its stamp date, stayed on the desk as I left. Black ink catching the last rays of the sun like a deadline written into stone. The courthouse lobby smelled of disinfectant and old carpet. I was shuffling papers back into Maxwell's leather folder when the glass doors swung open. The sound of heels and hard shoes carried across the marble. Ethan strode in with a smirk, his lawyer half a step behind him. Commentarios, he said loud enough for the clerks to hear. You can stop pretending. I've got proof now. I froze mid-motion. Proof of what? He pulled a folded sheet from his jacket pocket and held it in the air like a trophy. From where I stood, I knew that handwriting. Lydia's slanted loops. My brother had kept notes for everything, and so had his wife. Ethan let the crowd catch a glimpse. You, he declared. This note says you weren't fit, that you'd waste the land. It's her hand, not mine. I stepped closer, the folder pressed to my ribs. Where did you get that? Flushing. From her desk. Where you left it, he shot back. Guess you didn't check every drawer. Erks behind the counter traded looks. Clara Whitmore, the reporter who'd filmed the funeral, lingered in the corner with her phone raised. I caught her eye. She didn't nod, didn't move, but she was recording. Family tension rose sharp between us. You've crossed a line, Ethan, I said, my voice low. No, Dad, he sneered. You crossed it when you stole a legacy. I glanced at the big wall clock above the clerk's counter. Saturday, 3:45 p.m. Less than 2 days until the emergency hearing. Time was not on my side. My hand slipped, the F-150 keys clattering onto the marble with a metallic echo. The sound bounced across the chamber, louder than any gavel. I bent slowly to pick them up, the weight of silence pressing harder than Ethan's words. Tag heart pulse. For the first time, I wondered if the walls were closing faster than I could push back. You think one scrap of paper makes you heir? I said, straightening. It's more than you've got. The council will hear this Monday, and when they do, you'll be stripped of every acre. Ear leaned in, whispering, best to settle before the damage deepens. I forced a small laugh, dry as the dust outside. A thief can steal ink, Ethan, but not truth. That cut his smile for a flicker, but only a flicker. He tucked the note back into his pocket like a dagger waiting for Monday. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed in my coat. Samuel's name lit the screen. I answered. His voice was tight, hurried. Frank, you need to come back to the ranch. It's bad. What happened? I asked, moving toward the doors. Stand, then line the phone against my ear. Silence filling in the rest. Ethan's smirk widened as if he knew more than I did. Take Clara finally lowered her phone, catching every angle. Witnesses had seen enough. Proof or not, Ethan had staged a sting, and the countdown kept ticking. I stepped out into the late afternoon light, courthouse notice still warm in my pocket, Samuel's unfinished warning rattling louder than any verdict. The ranch gates were swinging when I pulled up in the F-150 that night. The headlights caught dust curling through the bars like smoke. I cut the engine, and silence lasted only a second before the bawling hit me. The herd wasn't calm. They were restless, shoving against the rails, kicking dirt, their voices rising like 1,000 unanswered questions. Samuel's truck was already parked by the feed shed. I found him leaning against the doorframe, holding a piece of paper like it had bitten him. His face was hard, the kind of expression a man wears when he's bracing to be the messenger. They pinned this to the gate. He handed it over. The red stamp jumped out even before I read the words. Final warning, payment due Monday 5 p.m. The logo of the feed supplier, the line item for 20 tons of grain, and at the bottom, my name printed in black. I shook my head. That's not possible. I paid last month, early. Samuel exhaled slow. Men are whispering, Frank. They think maybe you're letting it slip. I looked past him to the herd. Their bodies shifted like a tide. Horns brushing, hooves thudding. The sound was wrong, sharp, accusing. My chest tightened. Inside the feed shed, I pulled open the ledger. Every bill paid, every receipt signed. I found the entry from 3 weeks back. Payment wired, confirmation code scribbled in my own hand. I held it up like a shield. Kang, see this? It's clear. Someone's forged a gap. Samuel frowned. You think Ethan? Who else? I snapped. He's trying to starve 900 cattle just to prove a point. The paper crinkled in my fist. Heart pulse thudded in my ribs. The cattle's restless bawling sounded like blame, each cry a verdict I couldn't silence. We stepped back outside. 2 ranch hands stood by the pens, their voices low but not low enough. Maybe he missed a payment. He's getting old. Happens. I cut across the yard toward them. Never missed a payment in my life, I said, voice sharp as barbed wire. The men stiffened. One glanced at Samuel. All we know is the supplier called, said the account looked empty. Empty, I barked. That's a lie. One hand, but the damage was done. Doubt hung in the air thicker than dust, and held it up in the light from the F-150. The red stamp glared like blood. You think I'd let this ranch sink because I forgot to cut a check? If Ethan thinks starving my herd will break me, he's forgotten who fed him first. Punishable hand swallowed. We're just saying Monday's close. And there it was, the countdown. The same Monday, marked for the county hearing, now doubled as a deadline for the herd's survival. 2 clocks ticking toward the same hour. I pocketed the notice and walked the fence line. The cattle pressed against the rails, steam rising off their bodies. Their eyes caught the headlights and flashes, 100 small fires watching me. Samuel followed quietly. What's the play? Paper trail, I said. We show receipts, timestamps, every code I've got. He wants to bury me in lies? We'll drown him in truth. He nodded once, but his jaw stayed tight. The ranch hand still lingered, whispering in the dark. I shut the gate and chained it with a hard pull. Though it had never needed chaining before, the metal clank rang out like punctuation. Driving back toward the house, the F-150's beams swept across the pens. The restless herd shifted and moaned, a living reminder of what was at stake. The motif burned brighter now. The truck, the herd, the land, all under siege, all waiting on me to prove I hadn't lost control. I parked outside the house, the notice still burning in my pocket. For a moment I stayed in the cab, the steering wheel cold under my hands. Monday loomed. Court inside, cattle outside. Both threatened to collapse if I faltered. Inside, the house was dark. I spread the forged invoice and my ledger on the table, side by side, truth against lie. My handwriting steady against Ethan's smear. I took a pen and underlined the confirmation code twice, pressing hard enough to tear the paper. Then I whispered into the silence. You won't win by choking what I've kept alive. The clock on the wall clicked over to 11. Each tick sounded like a countdown drum. And still out in the pens, the cattle bawled. The town hall smelled of varnish and old paper when I stepped inside. The folding chairs were already filled, boots and Sunday shoes lined up in tight rows. I hadn't seen this many faces gathered since my brother's funeral. Some nodded when I walked to the front, others just stared, curious to see whether I would stand or fold. The projector screen loomed behind the podium. A single timestamp glowed in the corner. Monday, 7 p.m. That was my countdown. The moment Lydia's estate and my honor would either be sealed or stripped away. My palms felt rough on the wood rail, but steady. Ethan strolled in if he owned the air. His suit jacket was too sharp for this dusty town. He smirked at the crowd, then at me, and slid into a front row seat. I didn't greet him. I didn't need to. Flooring Whitmore, the reporter, adjusted her camera at the aisle. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, voice clipped, professional. Tonight we review evidence regarding the dispute over Doyle Ranch. Her tone left no room for theatrics. She tapped the keyboard, and the screen flickered. The first clip rolled, Ethan at my brother's graveside, his voice cold and unflinching. My father's a parasite. The words echoed through the hall. Gasps rippled across the rows. A ranch hand muttered something sharp under his breath. Ethan stood, forcing a laugh. That was taken out of context, he barked. You all know editing tricks. But Clara was ready. No edits, she replied, tapping the spacebar. The raw footage played again, uncut. His smirk at the casket was unmistakable. A rumble moved through the hall. Eyes turned toward me, then back at him. For once, I didn't feel anger or shame, only the weight of truth finally landing. Samuel Ortiz rose from his seat. He wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, people listened. I've worked this ranch for decades. Ethan never lifted a fence post, never drove a herd, never set foot in the soil after he left. Frank's brother left the land where it belonged, with the one man who kept it alive. The applause was light at first, then swelled. Ethan's jaw tightened. He tried to cut through the noise. He's senile. You've seen it. The video etched into my pocket and set the old F-150 keys on the podium with a soft clink. The hall quieted. You call me senile, I said evenly. But this ranch has been signed, sealed, and certified. And tonight, you'll see who's really unfit. Clara clicked again. Emails filled the screen. Ethan's name in bold. Promises to Nevada developers. parcel maps carved into plots labeled luxury resort and golf extension. Each document bore the digital date stamps. The projector made them large enough that no one could claim misreading. Ethan leapt to his feet. Fabrications! Anyone can fake emails. His voice rose, shrill, louder than I'd ever heard. Clara didn't flinch. We traced the domain. It came from your firm. Greenhouse. Hall erupted with voices. Neighbors whispered. Old partners shook their heads. Ethan's face flushed crimson. I leaned closer to the mic. My brother left me 300 acres and 900 cattle because he knew what mattered here. Legacy, not liquidation. And he said it himself. I raised a small recorder, pressed play. My brother's voice filled the room, steady, deliberate. Frank will never sell. Ethan only wants cash. Forge that followed was heavier than stone. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Ethan swayed on his feet, shouted, "Shame!" Others joined, not in chaos, but in clear voices. "Shame! Shame!" Ethan's bravado cracked. His shoulders slumped. He turned to me, eyes wild. "Dad, please, don't hand this to the DA. Don't let them take me. Help me, I'm begging you." He gripped my arm in front of everyone. His voice, once sharp enough to cut, was ragged now, desperate. I pulled free, slow, deliberate. "You're still my son," I told him, "but the law will teach you now, not me." He staggered back, chest heaving. His eyes darted across the room, looking for one ally, one believer. No one moved. Not Samuel, not Clara, not the ranch hands, not the mayor. Even his own lawyer had shifted 2 seats away. The hall felt alive, not with noise, but with clarity. People had seen, they had heard. The council chair rose. "We call for a vote, symbolic only, but it will stand as testimony." Hands lifted across the room. Every single one save Ethan's. I closed the recorder, slid the keys back into my pocket, and let the silence settle. "A lie makes noise," I said, voice calm, firm, "but truth doesn't need volume." The gavel struck wood. Ethan sank into his chair, red-faced, head lowered. His empire of bluffs was gone. When I stepped down from the podium, people parted in quiet respect. Samuel clasped my shoulder. Clara nodded once, her camera light still blinking. I didn't look back at Ethan. His remorse was loud enough to fill the hall. The morning after the town hall felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in months. I woke before dawn, the kind of instinct that never left me after years on the force. The house was still, the coffee pot silent. I didn't turn it on yet. I wanted the silence. Outside, a thin fog rolled low across the pasture, curling between the cedar posts of the fence line. The cattle moved slow, heads down, content. Samuel was already out there, leaning on the rail like he had been waiting for me. "You slept?" he asked. "Enough," I said, pulling my jacket tighter. My voice didn't sound like triumph. It sounded like steadiness. He pointed at the herd. "Quiet. They know when the storm has passed." I let my hand rest on the wood, rough under my palm. Maybe they do. Anne had tried to carve doubt into this place, accusing me of fraud, waving forged memos, spinning lies about dementia and corruption. He wanted the ranch cut to pieces, sold to developers who had never dirtied their boots. Last night, the truth landed hard enough to break him. But this morning was about something else, making it permanent. A pickup pulled into the gravel drive. Dust rose behind it like smoke. A county courier climbed out, leather satchel strapped across his chest. He walked with the posture of a man who'd done this 100 times. Not cruel, not sympathetic, just official. "Mr. Doyle?" I nodded. He handed me a large envelope stamped with the district attorney's seal. "Preliminary enforcement notice. Requires signature." "Postage." I signed on the clipboard. The sound of pen against paper seemed louder than the waking birds. When he left, I opened the envelope at the kitchen table. Inside was the DA's filing. Charges set to proceed: fraud, attempted misappropriation of trust assets, willful misrepresentation. Ethan's name in black ink, no longer whispered in rumor, but printed on the record. Attached was a hearing date, bold across the top. County court, 30 days. I stared at it longer than I needed to. Not to savor it, but to absorb the weight. Justice didn't feel like victory. It felt like steadiness, like the ground finally holding under my boots. Samuel stepped in behind me. "It's official then." "It is." He nodded once. "Think he'll come back?" "Not here," I said. "Not to this land." The silence after those words was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. By noon, Clara Whitmore called. Her voice carried the hum of a busy newsroom. "Mr. Doyle, the paper's running the story tomorrow. DA filings, witness testimonies, the full picture. I wanted to let you know before it hits print." "You've been fair," I told her. "Turbulence. I just put the truth on the record. The rest, that was your doing." Crier had always been enough. Last night proved it. That afternoon, I drove into town. The old F-150 rattled down the highway, steady as ever. At the courthouse steps, I stopped. A cluster of neighbors stood across the street, not protesting, just watching. Some tipped their hats. Others gave a nod. They weren't cheering, they were acknowledging. And that was more than I ever asked for. Inside, the clerk's office was sterile. Fluorescent lights, file cabinets lined like soldiers. I handed over the DA's envelope and received a stamped copy in return. The hearing date shone red across the page. 30 days. A countdown not just to Ethan's reckoning, but to the close of this chapter of my life. On my way out, I passed the wall of community notices. Farm auctions, bake sales, town council meetings. And there, freshly pinned, was Clara's flyer announcing tomorrow's front page story. A photo of me standing by the pasture, Samuel in the background. The caption read, "Truth holds." Back at the ranch, I laid the stamped notice on Lydia's desk, beside her old ledger. I reached into my pocket and placed the F-150 keys on the windowsill, the sun glinting off the worn metal. For a moment, I just left them there, listening to the quiet tick of the house. The symbol had come full circle, not about a truck anymore, but about carrying weight without breaking. Clovis patted in and rested his chin on my knee. His eyes, cloudy with age, were steady. I scratched behind his ear. "It's done, boy." I walked the fence line one more time before dusk. The cattle grazed, unbothered, the earth firm under my boots. Justice hadn't restored everything Ethan had taken from me, but it had built something else, a boundary he could never cross again. Roots don't bow to storms, they endure. And so would I. The land holds steady, patient as ever, and I've learned that justice moves the same way, slow but sure. My fight wasn't for pride, but for the roots beneath those 300 acres. Tonight, I set the old keys down on the sill, their metal clinking once in the quiet dark. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story.